Kia ora, Shaw Vineyard whānau. I do hope you're well today. It's been a really big week for us, COVID-wise at church, with several of our key players sick or self-isolating. And so our live stream today is quite a lot different to what it would normally be. Most importantly, our speaker, Carly Armstrong, has COVID. God bless you, Carly. So we've asked her to record her beautiful message called Together and Enough. And that will be coming after this, along with some questions for you to ponder if you'd like to take it a bit deeper as you go through the week. Hopefully next week we'll manage to be a little bit more live in the Facebook Live, if you get my drift. But we're doing what we can in reasonably difficult circumstances. I'm sure you'll understand. So speaking of next week, it's a really wonderful service. It's the fifth Sunday of the month, or it's a 5 Sunday month. And so we're doing things a little bit differently. We've asked Nerida Ashcroft, who is the breakfast host on Rima, to give us a guest speaker. She's one of ours, of course, but a guest speaker perspective on her very unique and very wonderful ministry that she has. And then at night, we're setting aside our evening time slot, our 5 o'clock time slot, for prayer and worship. It's going to be a lot of fun, a little bit different, and an ability to go deeper. I do hope you'll be able to join us. Then next month, don't forget about our Enneagram workshop. Enneagram, it's one of the most powerful and insightful tools that there is for understanding ourselves and others, for helping us know ourselves at a deeper and more objective level. And I know for me, I've loved learning about it and going deeper. It's helped me relate better to myself, it's helped me relate better to others, and it's helped me relate better to God. And I do hope you'll join us for an Enneagram workshop on Saturday, June the 18th. I think that will be fantastic. So with that as a greeting and introduction, we're missing you today. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you obviously won't be with us in person. We're certainly missing Carly, who brings us her message via the wonders of modern science. But whatever, I think you're going to enjoy this very personal and also very beautiful message that Carly calls Together and Enough. See you next week.
Hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. I wish that I could be with you this morning, seeing all of your lovely faces, but I guess this is just the world that we have to live in at the moment. I made it through 6 days of isolation with a bunch of people who had COVID, and I didn't have COVID that whole time. And then on day 7, the day before freedom, I tested positive for COVID. So I am in isolation for another 7 days, which is super unfortunate for me. So please bear with me this morning that I'm a little bit stuffed up and blocked up and sniffly, but there isn't really much that I can do about that at the moment. And thankfully what I'm talking about kind of relates to that. The idea that this is not about perfection. That's not the point of faith. And I guess I am a great example of that this morning, being online for you guys and being slightly not my usual self. So when I was asked to speak for this week, I am going to be honest with you, I wasn't super excited at the idea, mostly because I have been preaching a lot recently, and so I'm just feeling a little bit tired of speaking, which is so unlike me because I love it. But yeah, so God's given me that passion and a little bit of gifting in that area, but I've done a lot of it recently, particularly over Easter. I preached on the Friday, the Saturday, and the Sunday. So I feel like yeah, just a little bit tired. I did it running on very little sleep and a lot of caffeine, so it was a lot and I'm exhausted. So Vic asked me what I'd spoken about for Easter, and I told him that my Sunday message had been about the fact that Jesus had died on the cross in that awful way to be the sacrifice for us, because he thinks that we're worth it. He fought death and he won because he thinks that we're worth it. He thinks that we're good enough for that. So that is my topic, which is actually really exciting, and I actually really enjoyed writing this message after all. So the thought of being enough came from the resurrection of Jesus. And it's actually funny that that was what I was talking about at that camp. So I went and spoke at my friend's Easter camp on the Saturday night and Sunday morning, after I'd run an overnighter at our church on the Friday night and spoken at that and barely slept at all. But my experience at that camp was It just really showed that it's not about perfection. It was outdoors on the Saturday night, and I sat down on the edge of the stage, which I was barely inside the marquee, and there was just rain pouring down in front of me, like a curtain between me and the young people, which was quite funny. And I had this little but really bright light, like kind of behind me, so it was barely highlighting my notes, kind of in my eyes. And that was my not ideal preaching situation, but it actually worked out fine in the end. It wasn't perfect, but that wasn't the point. The point was that what I had to say was valuable in that situation, despite my humanness and the imperfection of the moment. I focused in that message on what the death and resurrection meant back then and what it means for us now. Jesus died on the cross and he came back for you because he loves you deeply and fully. And there's nothing that you can do to make God love you any less than he does right now. And there's also nothing that you can do to make God love you any more than he does right now, because he currently loves you to the absolute fullest of love. Like, he loves us so much more than we can even comprehend. No ifs or buts about it. We are human, and to be human means that we're not perfect, even when sometimes we might like to think that we're pretty close. But because of the death and resurrection of Jesus, we don't need to be perfect, and we don't need to try to be perfect anymore. Feeling not good enough is something that I have struggled with my whole life. It's a phrase that's hung over me for as long as I can remember. Not smart enough, or pretty enough, or skinny enough for people to like or love me. To get super raw and honest, it's something that has kind of popped back up for me this week as I've been preparing this message and as I've been stuck in isolation in a COVID household. I was feeling very lonely and sad that barely any of my friends had reached out to me, and it hurt. And I definitely thought, what's wrong with me? Why am I not good enough? And I was talking on the phone to my mum about it, who I don't think would call herself a Christian anymore, but she challenged me after supporting and comforting me, of course, as mothers should do. But she asked me, what is God saying in these feelings? What is he calling you to at the moment? Maybe he was trying to remind me that the reality is that I'm already loved and seen as good enough by God, so it doesn't really matter what other people have to say. All my life, I felt like I'm not good enough in one way or another, and I've been scared of being rejected. But the simple truth is that God will never reject us, and he will never see us as not good enough. Being enough is not about circumstance or ability or output. It's about being you. It's about doing what you can even when you don't think that that's enough. Enough isn't about what people think of you or your productivity or your appearance. It's about what God has to say about you. The world likes us to think that what we produce is relevant to our worth, but that's actually not true. And it's not really a sustainable or reliable model to base your value on, because it fluctuates so much. Jesus sees us as we are today, tomorrow, and every other day, and values us exactly the same, and he always values us as good enough. Romans 5:6-11. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows us his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled by God by the death of his Son, much more now that we are reconciled, shall we be saved by his life. More than that, we also rejoice in God through the love of Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. Jesus' death wasn't an earned thing. It didn't happen because the people around then deserved it. Our identity and our value are not rooted in what we do, our successes or our failures. Our identity is rooted in this truth, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I came across this quote on Instagram this week, which is super random, but it was really convenient because it fit really well with what I'm speaking about today, and it says this: "It is so much nicer to be a human when I'm not filled with crippling shame about my humanity." We find it so easy to get caught up in the little things that we do wrong, but we're simply human, and to be human means that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, we mess up sometimes, and sometimes we succeed, but either way, we're enough for God. Jesus thought that we were good enough to die for in the most painful way and come back, so who cares what other people think? It doesn't really even matter what you think of yourself, because Jesus thinks that you're good enough just as you are. So now what does this mean for us together? Because this is together and enough. First of all, I think that it means that we can relieve pressure and maybe some sadness that comes with church post-lockdowns. COVID has been really disruptive and horrible and unsettling, and as a result, church looks a little bit different now. Maybe it's a little bit smaller. I usually have about 3 kids in my intermediates program each week, which is totally fine. Thankfully, numbers aren't the point. We don't have to be huge. We don't have to have everything perfect. Thank goodness for that. We are enough just as we come, even when our evening service is struggling to get into double digits, because when 2 or more are gathered in the name of the Lord, He is there. And that's what it's all about, gathering in His name. And we're still doing that, and we are enough. It's important for us to remind each other of the truth of what it means to be a child of God. We are created to be in relationship with each other, and part of that is encouragement. Part of that is reminding one another of the truth of Jesus on the cross and how that is a personal thing for each and every single one of us. Being a follower of Christ and being part of church is not about winning God points. There shouldn't be pressure on your shoulders to always be happy or without any doubts about God and faith. You shouldn't hold back from serving because you don't think you do a good job, but you also shouldn't serve when you're burnt out because you feel like you have to. If your heart is for loving God and for loving people, what more could we ask for? Church together is not about perfection. Just choosing to be together is enough. If you invite someone over to your place, they don't really care about what food you give them. They're focused on the fact that you want to be in community with them and share a meal with them. If you give someone a ride somewhere, they don't really care if your car is a little bit messy. They appreciate that you are willing to give up your time and help them. If you are willing to engage in conversation with someone, they don't really care if it's a little bit awkward. They're grateful that they're not alone anymore. Being together is enough, and it doesn't matter if it's perfect. Someone recently reminded me of something really small but really significant that happened while Jesus was on the cross. While he was struggling for breath, nearly dead, Jesus saw how important it was for people to be together. The last thing he did was make sure that James had a mother and Mary had a son, knowing that he couldn't be that for either of them anymore. A small action, but so significant. And I think that that's probably true for a lot of us too. We don't think that we're doing very much, but for other people it can be really significant. Wanting to help one another can feel overwhelming at times because we want to do something big and meaningful, otherwise it isn't worth it. But that's not the reality of it. Jesus did all sorts of crazy big miracles, that is true, but we also see a lot of small things that he did. He was willing to speak to people who others weren't willing to speak to. He taught small lessons to people who wanted to learn. He knew the value of something. Something is better than nothing, and something is enough. Last week at youth group, I was feeling very, very tired, like brain foggy tired, and I wasn't really in the headspace to be at youth. Usually I just get there and I'm right into it, ready to go, the energy is there, but last week was a real struggle for me. I definitely could have looked at it like a failure. I didn't engage amazingly well with the kids, but I was there, and I didn't have to carry it all alone. I have an amazing team of leaders who brought the energy that I just simply couldn't. The youth saw that I was there, and I was there because I loved them. And they still had a great night, and that's what matters. It's not something that I have to shoulder alone. I have a team who bring all sorts of talents and interests that I don't have. We all bond with the youth in different ways and engage with different people differently. It's like the Enneagram that we've been talking about over the last few weeks because we've got the workshop coming up. There are a lot of different ways to approach and look at situations, and we all come with different motivations or needs or life experiences. And when we weave all of that together, I just can't help to think how lucky the youth of this church are, because the team that is serving them is so diverse and it is just great. They're awesome. Throughout a youth night, I don't have to be everything to everyone or do everything for everyone, because we're a team, and what I bring as an individual to that team is enough, and what each and every one of my leaders bring to that team as individuals is enough. And together, what we have to offer the teenagers is more than enough. It's really humbling knowing that I can't shoulder it all, and it's a relief to know that I don't have to shoulder it all. I don't have to be more than I am today or any other day of my life. What I can offer may change over time, but what I can offer will always be enough. One of the few times in my life that I've verbally heard God speak to me, because he doesn't do that very often, was him asking me, why do you still think you're not good enough? Because he doesn't think that. I'm me. I'm Carly, a 20-something youth pastor with social anxiety, and I am good enough for Jesus, for my ministry, for anything else that I'm doing in my life, and that's really something. I love that. Why do you still think you're not good enough? Jesus was literally nailed to a cross, taunted, teased, killed. He was placed in a tomb and dressed with linen cloth and spices. He lay dead for 3 days and he came back to life, and he did all of that because he thinks you're good enough. And if you're good enough for Jesus to do that for you, you're good enough for anything in your life that you may not think that you're good enough for. Don't let people tell the story of your life. Don't let them make you feel like you don't deserve love or respect or joy. I have spent far too many years letting other people tell the story of my life for me, and I've told myself the story that I think that they might say. Instead, let the death-defeating, humble, sacrificial, loving Jesus write the story of your life. Let him show you who you really are, because who you really are is loved, enough, worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy of going through all of that pain and suffering, no matter what you've done, no matter what you've said, no matter what you look like, no matter what has been done to you. You are worthy. You are enough, and you are loved, and that will never ever change. Here at SVC, those of us in the room, those of us watching at home, and those of us who aren't really engaged at all, together we are enough. And no matter what Shore Vineyard Church looks like each week, we are enough. There's a song that's been stuck in my head all week while I've been preparing for this message, and it's called Jireh. The song begins with the line, "I'll never be more loved than I am right now. I wasn't holding you up, so there's nothing I can do to let you down." And that is such a relief to know. We are fully loved by God now, and we always will be, because to Him, we're worth it. We are enough. And that has nothing to do with our achievements or our actions. Let me pray. Thank you, Jesus, that you paid the ultimate price so that we could always know that we are enough. Whether we feel like you're near or far, we are enough. Father, I pray that we reject any shame that we may feel about our humanity, and in its place, may we feel peace and gratitude, knowing that we are worthy, we are loved, and we are enough because you say so. Amen. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for listening. I hope to be with you next week. But yeah, I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll see you soon. Bye.